So, as Artsidi said just before tea break, I'm going to be continuing the theme of this series of talks on the path to awakening. And tonight we're going to be looking at making up your mind. So last week, Artsidi introduced us to the two main themes of this series. So the first of those themes, which he talked about after the meditation anyway, was the 5 Vinyatas, as they are known in kind of Buddhist language. So the mental events or the mental states that we need to have in order to bring anything about, in order to achieve any goal. So last week, Artsidi started us with the first of these. I've summarised them here on this flip chart. If you can't see them on Zoom, somebody was very helpfully agreed to type them in so you can see them on the chat. I'm not going to be referring to them much, they're just here so that you can have a look. Sadly, my artistic skills don't come anywhere near those of Sadhuraja. For those of you who have had the joys of our presentation by Sadhuraja, he always decorates his flip charts very beautifully. I'm afraid mine's a little bit more utilitarian. Anyway, so last week we looked at chanda, which translates as roughly want, but it's more than just, bar of chocolate want. There's a sort of sincerity in that want. Artsidi brought it out very beautifully with the word fascination. So there's a fascination in that sense of wanting. And in a way, that's where we start on the spiritual life. There's something about it, might not be able to put our finger on it, but there's something there that just somehow fascinates us. Tonight, we're going to be looking more at the second one on the list, Adimoksha. Adimoksha is where we finally decide that this is what we're going to do. So we've had a sense of fascination, and tonight we're going to be looking at how we can bring about that decision that, yep, I'm going to go for this. So within Adimoksha, there's a sort of sense of firm persuasion, or the kind of definition I quite liked was there's a dedication based on fascination. So based on the fascination of our chanda, there's a dedication based on that. So the next 3 Vinyatas will be the subject of further talks, but I'll just quickly run through them just so that we start to get them in our heads. So next there's smriti. So smriti is a word that is often used when we're discussing meditation. It is another word which means mindfulness. In this context, it's come across with a quality of remember. And remembering is an intrinsic part of mindfulness. Another way of thinking about that would be that it's a continuous application of effort. So after the fascination, the decision, in order to achieve a goal, there has to be a continuous application of effort. We need to remember that we made the decision. It's easy to make decisions and then a week or so later forget that they were ever made. So as part of the kind of sequence of events that need to be in place in order to bring anything about, we need to remember we've decided. And then again, in the 4th stage or the 4th quality or state of mind or whatever, again is another word that we tend to come across more in our language of meditation, which is samadhi. So samadhi has been translated as focus. So it's often a sense of strong concentration or focus in the context of meditation. In this context, it's those same qualities, but in the context of our life. So not just restricted to our meditation practice, but to our entire life. Our entire life has a focus on the goal. And within that focus, there's a sense of contentment. There's a sense of satisfaction. And there's a sense of reduction in craving. So all of this language can be applied to a meditation experience. But in this context, we're thinking about all of those sorts of qualities actually being with us 24/7 in our lives, whether we are meditating or not. So the kind of following the goal of an awakened mind, we should have a sense of contentment in our lives. We should have a sense of satisfaction that our lives are going in the right direction. And we should have a reduction in craving for other things, for other goals. We should be focusing, as we've mentioned, on that particular goal, and all other goals should be starting to fall away from our awareness or our interest. And then finally, we have, again, can be used in the context of meditation, the sense of prajna. Prajna is translated here as think. It's often translated as wisdom. Understanding is another good way to think about prajna. Prajna brings in a sense of ethics. And prajna is a sort of an understanding more and more and more deeply of why we're doing what we're doing and how best we can do what we need to do to achieve the goal of awakening. So we have a deeper and deeper understanding of the teachings, of the practices, such that our life continues to move in the direction of awakening. So that's a quick run through the 5 vinyatas that will be the kind of mental states, as it were, we need to be cultivating or we need to have to achieve the goal. The second theme that Heart Sutra introduced was the Bodhichary Avatara. So this book here, there are various translations of this book. And as Heart Sutra mentioned, this book is considered a giant of world spirituality. It is not a niche book for those of us here in the Triratna Centre in Cambridge or whatever. This is widely regarded throughout the world as a giant seminal text on spirituality. Not a necessarily easy read, but a very, very, very significant piece of work, which has stayed with us since, as I've said, the 7th century or thereabouts, we don't know exactly, when Shantideva, the author, was alive and at some point in his life put it together. So, as we heard last week, he was a 7th century monk at the great Buddhist university, as it were, of Nalanda, which no longer exists. Just to recap, as Arthur was saying last week, at the time Shantideva had a reputation amongst his peers as being a little bit of a waste of time. He was seen as being rather lazy, he slept long, he ate well, and was not the first to put his hand up whenever anything was needing doing. However, in secret and more unbeknown to his peers, Shantideva allegedly spent most of his evenings communing and being taught by Manjushri. Manjushri is a great bodhisattva, particularly associated with wisdom. And Shantideva had a strong connection and indeed was allegedly taught directly by Manjushri. And the Bodhicaryavatara was presented, as it were, by Shantideva in the context of a talk. There was a little bit of naughtiness, as his peers thought that they would like to see him humiliated, so asked him to give a talk to some visiting dignitary or whatever. He agreed to give the talk. He asked if they wanted to hear something old or something new. They thought something new would be harder for them, so they said something new. So Shantideva then just sat down and espoused the Bodhichary Avatara, which legend has it was the culmination of all of his communing and learning and teaching from Manjushri. So I should just say here, perhaps just for some sort of clarification or whatever, or just to put some context in, that Shantideva followed the Mahayana school of Buddhism. And in the Mahayana school of Buddhism, it's absolutely central that the quest for enlightenment, the quest for awakening, is for the sake of all others. Now, many of us here might be thinking, but I would quite like to be enlightened for me. It would make me feel better. I might feel much better than I do now. All of the problems I have might not be there if I was enlightened. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to find out about that for me. Now, in a way, that's absolutely fine. In a way, there's no particular contradiction there, even though it might sound like there is. We have to be aware of where we are. And we have to have our chanda, and we have to have our admoksha, we have to have our want, and we have to make our decisions based on an awareness of where we're at. And we need to be quite far on before we can, as it were, realize that it's not really possible to get to the end when you're just grabbing onto it for yourself. At some point on the path, that whole thing just has to relax. And we have to realize that actually ourselves and other people are much the same. One of the central teachings of Buddhism is that of non-duality, that there's no separation between self and others. Now, that is not easy to understand. That where we are at our different stages of development, we understand that to some or less degree. So there's no contradiction in that the Mahayana goal is squarely the attainment of enlightenment for the benefit of all. And our own, slightly selfish, but I would like to be enlightened for me. We all have to just be aware of where we are on the path and have faith and keep going with that path. So I thought it would be important just to kind of clear up that confusion between a kind of Mahayana, very high Mahayana goal and our much more elementary and beginning stages. So turning more to where we're at tonight, we're going to be looking at the second of the Vinyatas, Adimoksha. And as Arta said, he was saying, these are outlined in chapters 2 and 3 of the Bodhicaryavatara. So we're slowly working our way through the book. And these chapters really deal with the transition from wanting to open ourselves up to the bodhicitta or to having an awakened mind. The bodhicitta and awakened mind are somewhat interchangeable. We need to decide what to do, what's necessary to make that happen. So that's what we're looking at primarily in these chapters tonight. And these chapters outline the steps of a traditional Buddhist ritual known as the sevenfold puja. And the sevenfold puja, can I just check, is everybody or anyone, how many people are familiar with the sevenfold puja? Yeah, okay, so about 50-50-ish maybe. Okay, so that's fine. So a sevenfold puja, some of you I might find this you know that you know all this already, but there's no harm in going through it again. So the Sevenfold Puja really takes us on a little bit of a journey through the Vinyatas. So it takes us on a journey through a progressive series of reflections, meditations, actions, designed to lead us to the firm decision to devote ourselves to the spiritual life, to devote ourselves to the path of awakening. So a Sevenfold Puja, in a way, it's a kind of ritual journey that we go on. So we're not being told anything in particular. It's very much based in the imaginal. So we have to kind of, to some degree, suspend rational minds, to suspend our Western analytic and rational approach, and just kind of go with the flow. Just let ourselves go with the flow. Just open up your minds, open up your hearts, and just go with the flow. That's one way to approach puja. And the analogy of the puja begins with, and continues to a degree. It's based on an analogy between inviting an esteemed guest to your house. But this esteemed guest that we are inviting is the bodhicitta. It's the will to enlightenment, the path to awakening. That's what we're inviting in. So our mind is the house, the bodhicitta is our esteemed guest. And as we would do with any esteemed guest, we like to treat them with respect. So, if you like, we get out the best china for them. So we move from inviting the guest in through a series of steps to, in the end, finally dedicating ourselves wholeheartedly to the path of awakening. We are inviting the bodhicitta in wholeheartedly. The puja itself is said in call and response. So, as well as being said, recited in call and response, during it, there are spells where we can make offerings to the shrine, and there are spells where we chant mantras. So in that way, when we're doing a puja, we're involving body, speech, and mind. So in that way, we're involving all of us. All of us are involved in a puja. So when we're meditating, there's only really our mind. So we sit by ourselves in our meditation on our cushions, and we focus on the object of the meditation, very solitary, as it were, type activity. In a puja, we do it together. We do it involving our body, speech, and mind. So we talk out loud, we move to make offerings, and we chant mantras. So all of us are involved in this practice. It's a practice of our wholeness, in a way. So now I would like to just kind of run through and give a quick summary of the 7 steps that are involved. So the first step, called worship, we want to make the guest welcome. So the guest that we've invited into our home, the bodhicitta that we're inviting into our minds, we want to make them welcome. So we offer them nice things. We offer them nice drinks, we offer them nice food, to say we get out the best china, you could say. And in part of that process, imagining those beautiful things that we're offering helps to beautify our mind. And a beautiful mind is a much more attractive place for a guest to come into than a cluttered, unwelcoming space. So in this stage, in a way, we're both trying to make our minds as welcoming as possible by beautifying them and offering that beauty to the esteemed guest. In the next stage, salutation, we offer some respectful greetings. So bowing in the East is how that would normally be done, a bit less so here in the West, but we offer respectful greetings. And we express our respect, as it were, and our acknowledgement that the bodhicitta that we are inviting in is above us, is ahead of us, is an aspiration for us. It is, as it were, it's a representation of the best of us that we want to become. So we kind of bow to that aspiration. And this is the stage where we might come up and bow to the shrine as a kind of an embodiment of that aspiration of the best of us, of the future. And we would make an offering to that aspiration. And then in the third stage, called going for refuge, we commit ourselves to practice. So we recognize in this stage that the refuges of the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, are far more important and true for us than any other refuge we may have been running to. We can often run to false refuges of career, relationships, all these sorts of things that we can run to as safe havens, as refuges. So in this section, we're recognizing that the safest refuge we have for us are the three jewels of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And we're also in this section, there's usually a bit of chanting here, we recognize the importance of aligning our lives along the lines of the 5 ethical precepts. So we're realizing and committing to leading as ethical a life as we can. We're recognizing the importance of ethics in the maintenance of our positive mental state. So in some ways that's a kind of central, sort of in the middle of the puja roughly, and it's a kind of a central part of the rest of our lives. So in the Buddhist center we often talk about our going for refuge, by which we're sort of basically meaning our spiritual life. And going for refuge can be measured in different kind of levels of commitment. So people have different levels of commitment. So when you come along at the beginning, that might be very preliminary. If you ask later on to become a mitra or a friend, then that level of going for refuge has deepened somewhat. And then if you carry on to become ordained, then that level of going for refuge and then we deepened yet further. And there's sort of no end to the depth that going for refuge can go. So it's really quite a sort of a central point in the puja, and it's good that it's sort of right in the middle-ish, if you can get a middle of 7. So after that, we move on to a section called confession. Now this might sound a little bit scary. It's not really. The confession section is really just acknowledging that once you've embarked upon a spiritual life, you will naturally become aware of how far short of where you would like to be you actually are. So you realize that whilst you think you might be per se perfect, you're not really. You become aware of your shortcomings and they become a bit of a burden. And you would like to get rid of that burden. And you can get rid of that burden by confessing. So in the puja, we have a period of confessing where we just confess our burden. Ritually, I'm not saying you stand up and say, oh, I did stole 2 pence last week or whatever. It's not, we're not actually confessing. In the puja, we are ritually deburdening ourselves of our shortcomings. And then the next section is a very positive spin on exactly the same mindset. So the mindset of confession is that we're aware of our shortcomings in regards to the ideal that we would like to become. And in the next session, rejoicing, we're aware of how well other people are, what good deeds other people do, how marvelous other people are in so many respects. So these are flowerings, as it were, in 2 different directions of the same kind of deepening awareness. There's the confession where we feel our own shortcomings, and there's the rejoicings where we think, gosh, that was such a lovely, generous thing to do. That was so kind when you did this or that. We're aware of all these positive qualities of other people, as well as ourselves. So as well as our shortcomings, we are aware of the progress that we're making. We are aware we're better than we were this time last year, or this time 5 years ago, this time 20 years ago. We are aware of the progress that we're making. So it's quite key that this awareness has both positive and negative flowerings, not just negative flowerings. We tend to kind of overemphasize how bad we are or how we're not progressing or all the things we're doing wrong, and underemphasize all the changes, the positive changes that we've made, and how well we are doing in so many ways. They're coming from the same root. They're 2 flowers of the same root, and one should never be kind of overemphasized at the expense of the other. They need to be balanced. So we have these 2 sections following from each other of confessing and of rejoicing. And then the 6th section is a really beautiful, beautiful, beautiful section. We have in Tritium Supplication, it's called. And in this section, we're realizing that we're trying, we're doing well, we have our shortcomings, we're committed to the path, we really want to progress along the path. We're pleading with the Bodhisattvas, the powers that be, we're pleading with them, heartfelt plea for help. We want very deeply, we realize how deep this want, this desire to move along the path towards awakening is. And we want all the help that we can get. So we plead for a teaching, for help from them. And after that, this is quite lovely. It's the one bit of a puja that's never done in call and response. The next section is we recite in unison, it's always in unison, a deep teaching called the Heart Sutra. It's a very deep, very profound teaching, which I'm not going to be going into. But just to let you know that this section, it's one that you have to kind of, at some point, you decide to learn by heart. So that in this part of the puja, it's not call and response, we all recite this teaching. The reason that it's done that way, which is lovely, is that if all libraries burnt down and somebody unplugged the internet, we couldn't Google it, how would we access teachings? We can't access teaching. We have to have some that we can learn, that we have in our heads, that we can rely on as being there, and we can continue to reflect upon in the absence of any other access to any other teaching. So the Heart Sutra is learnt by heart, and we recite it in unison together. It's a very profound and magical and mystical teaching. And then in the last section, the 7th section, called Self-Surrender, or Rejoicing Merits in Self-Surrender, This is where we finally give ourselves up to the path. As it were, in this last section, we finally make the decision. So we declare in this section the decision that this path is the path for us, and that this path is the only way that we can see of leading a fulfilling life. We have a short life, we only have a number of years. We decide that this is the only way that we can make those years meaningful. Short as they are, this is the way to make them meaningful and fulfilling for us. So this is when we've reached Moksha, as it were. The decision has been made. Then there's usually some mantras, and then there's a very key point, a very, very key point at the end of the puja. So our mantras go on, and whoever's leading the puja will ring the bell at the end, and at the end, the mantra will die down, and at the end the bell won't be rung. The leader will leave silence for a minute or two, not very long. But that silence is golden. The silence at the end of a puja has a quality and a beauty that really just has to be experienced. So at the end of a puja, we've done all this, we've been on this journey, imaginal journey. We've invited the bodhicitta to manifest itself within us. We've dedicated ourselves to the path. We've done this together with brothers and sisters on the path. And at the end, there's just silence. And we just sit and we can just feel, if it's worked well, we can just feel some mystical quality in those moments. The silence at the end of a puja is perhaps one of its most important sections and shouldn't be rushed. So, how are we doing for time? Okay, not too bad. So that's a kind of quick recap, as it were, of the five Vinyatas, and also the stages of a sevenfold puja. Now, the language of a sevenfold puja, and indeed the language of the Bodhicaryavatara in general, is quite challenging. It's quite challenging language for us in the West. And in fact, the whole process of a puja can be challenging. It's not something that certainly us in the West are quite used to. We're not used to as it were, being so demonstrative. So that in itself can be a challenge to some of us. Some of us may love it. Some of us might feel quite challenged by it. But then, in a way, the spiritual life is challenging. You know, we cannot guarantee that spiritual life will be an easy life or a life without challenges. It is a challenging life. But it's an extremely rewarding life. And once chosen, in a way, it's the only choice of life for those of us who have made that kind of commitment. So the spiritual life is both challenging and extremely rewarding. And you could say, once you've made a certain level of commitment, there is no other choice. It's the only one you've got. So I've got some time. I thought I would like to share my own personal experience of puja. Now, one of the things I've really appreciated about being able to give tonight's talk is the fact that I was never present at a talk like this. Nobody, as it were, explained puja to me before I just kind of turned up at one. Nobody else's fault. I probably just wasn't well that night or whatever, I don't know. But I remember being at a puja for the first time and being a little bit freaked. I was quite new, a very long time ago. I was quite new, and I'd met lots of people who had amazing qualities that I really admired and really got my chanda going, as it were. There was something about what these people had that I really wanted. I was very, very strongly influenced by some marvelous individuals who just emanated something, some qualities that I just thought were astounding. So I really wanted that. And then we went to a puja, and they seemed quite happy to be reciting what sounded to me like slightly mumbo jumbo, making offerings, which I found quite a challenge. I wasn't from any kind of Christian or other religious tradition where these things were routinely done, so I'd never experienced them before. I found puja very, very, very challenging. However, a lot of these people, I didn't really know what to do with that, but I had such faith in these people who had these qualities that I thought, well, maybe it's just something I don't quite get yet. And lots of people will say that pujas are much more effective or enjoyable the more people that are in them. So if you ever go on retreats, pujas are kind of like the thing that you do every evening before bed. So you can have a puja every evening. So people would love pujas and say that they really enjoy doing a puja with 50 other men or 60 or however many were on the retreat. Sometimes hundreds, depending on the retreat. And I thought, well, if I turn up, at least I can be one other digit. Their enthusiasm was not my enthusiasm at that point. I couldn't share that enthusiasm, but I could be one other digit that made the numbers bigger, and bigger numbers seemed to please other people. So I did that for a long time. And that was about the level of engagement I could have. But then I realized after puja, during pujas, it's usually quite meditative. Very often people will have their eyes closed throughout it. It can be treated as a meditation. I didn't always, sometimes do now. At that time, I didn't always. And I realized that after 50 or 60 people had been up making offerings, the shrine was just aglow with candles. And I was just really struck by how beautiful the shrine was. I was just really struck by how beautiful all these people expressing their aspirations was. Those expressions of aspirations as manifest on the shrine and candles was just something of really deep beauty. Some of the candles were a bit skew with, some of the candles were burning really healthily. And it just seemed to kind of represent humanity. Some of us, have got stronger commitment. Some of us are not quite so sure just yet. We're all at different stages. And seeing that all, as it were, brought to life on a shrine was something of just immense beauty. So I used to really enjoy not really bothering about words, but just looking at the shrine after the offerings had been made, and just realizing that all of these people from all their different walks of life, from all their different backgrounds, had all come together and all expressed an aspiration to make the most of themselves. And it was just astoundingly beautiful. And finally, I kind of got to realizing the silence after the final mantra dies down and before the bell is rung, was just so beautiful. There was a quality to that silence that was quite transformative and quite beautiful. So all of these steps, these steps took me years, years. I would be going along to pujas, wondering why I was there, and slowly different aspects of the process hit me in different ways. And then during an ordination retreat, which is a 4-month retreat, we did puja every night. And in some of those pujas with the guys I was ordained with, there was just such a sense of connection between us all, just a sense that there was something we were that was not us, but was bigger than us. It was bigger than the sum of the component parts, which were the men on the ordination retreat. There was just occasionally in pujas, there was something that was quite palpable on that retreat. So I thought I would share that just because, in a way, you know, I wish 20 years ago or whatever, I'd been at a talk like this, where somebody kind of explained puja. I might have been able to then make more progress with puja than I did. It took me a long, long time. So I had to kind of work it out for myself. But actually, the way I've worked it out, I think, you know, I've experienced incredible beauty through that just turning up, having faith, just turning up. Eventually, something will happen. You won't know what, you won't be able to predict it, but eventually, something will happen. So we're running just a bit out of time. What I thought we would do now, we're not going to do a puja, we don't have time, but if you'd like to just make yourselves comfortable, like we're meditating, but we're not necessarily meditating. Just for those of you who have never experienced a puja, I'd like to just read through it. So we're not going to do any offerings or any of that. I'm just going to read you the words of the different sections. And I'd just invite you to have an open mind and an open heart and just go with the flow. Just go with the flow, just listen to the words and just let them wash over you. And when I'm finished, the last words I will say is to peace. Let me just double check that. I'm in a multimedia presentation this evening, which is unusual for me. Yeah, so when I say the words to peace, I'm finished. And after I've said the words to peace, I'd just like us to try and sit in perfect, complete silence and just see what you experience. You may experience nothing, that's fine, but just try and experience some of the quality of the silence of the end of a puja. So, if you're all sitting comfortably, the sevenfold puja. Worship. With Mandarava, blue lotus and jasmine, with all flowers pleasing and fragrant, and with garlands skillfully woven, I pay honour to the princes of the sages, so worthy of veneration. I envelop them in clouds of incense, sweet and penetrating. I make them offerings of food, hard and soft, and pleasing kinds of liquids to drink. I offer them lamps encrusted with jewels, festooned with golden lotus. On the paving, sprinkled with perfume, I scatter handfuls of beautiful flowers. Salutation. As many atoms as there are in the 1,000 million worlds, so many times I make reverent salutation to all the Buddhas of the 3 eras, to the Siddharma, and to the excellent community. I pay homage to all the shrines and places in which the Bodhisattvas have been. I make profound obeisance to the teachers and those to whom respectful salutation is due. going for refuge. This very day, I go for my refuge to the powerful protectors, whose purpose is to guard the universe, the mighty conquerors who overcome suffering everywhere. Wholeheartedly also I take my refuge in the Dharma they have ascertained, which is the abode of security against the rounds of rebirth. Likewise, in the host of Bodhisattvas, I take my refuge. Confession. The evil which I have heaped up through my ignorance and foolishness, evil in the world of everyday experience, as well as evil in understanding and intelligence, all that I acknowledge to the protectors, standing before them with hands raised in reverence and terrified of suffering. I pay salutations again and again. May the leaders receive this kindly, just as it is with its many faults. What is not good, O protectors, I shall not do again. Rejoicing in merit. I rejoice with delight in the good done by all beings, through which they obtain rest with the end of suffering. May those who have suffered be happy. I rejoice in the release of beings from the sufferings of the round of existence. I rejoice in the nature of the Bodhisattva and the Buddha, who are protectors. I rejoice in the arising of the will to enlightenment and the teaching, these oceans which bring happiness to all beings and are the abode of welfare of all beings. In Tritium Supplication. Saluting them with folded hands, I entreat the Buddhas in all the quarters, may they make shine the lamp of the Dharma for those wandering in the suffering of delusion. With hands folded in reverence, I implore the conquerors desiring to enter nirvana, may they remain here for endless ages, so that life in this world does not grow dark. Transference of merit and self-surrender. May the merit gained in my acting thus go to the alleviation of the suffering of all beings. My personality throughout my existences, my possessions, and my merit in all three ways, I give up without regard to myself for the benefit of all beings. Just as the earth and other elements are serviceable in many ways to the infinite number of beings inhabiting limitless space, so may I become that which maintains all beings, situated throughout space, so long as all have not attained to peace. So I hope that's given you a flavour of Shantideva's journey to Adimoksha, journey to making your mind up. So next week there'll be another talk. I forgot who's next.
Manjurava.
Manjurava, yes, next week we'll be continuing in this theme, and Manjurava will be giving us a talk. So that'll be something to look forward to. So finally, just like to thank everybody for coming this evening, and hope to see you all again next week. And to remind you that the Buddha Centre that we enjoy here runs on a rather novel and radical dana economy. So we don't charge for courses teaching Buddhism and meditation. Rather, we leave it up to you to decide if you would like to make any sort of donation towards the running of the Buddha Centre. Obviously, it has quite a lot of bills to pay. So you can give as little or as much as you like. Everything is welcome. There are little envelopes dotted around in the foyer where you can just make a one-off donation, or if you felt so moved, you could make a donation through a standing order, which allows the Buddha Centre to kind of plan, because they have more of a sense of future income streams. So anything that you would like to give would be gratefully received, but please don't feel under any pressure. If you don't feel moved to give or don't have the financial means, that's absolutely fine. You are more than welcome to come and partake of these classes as much as you like. So that's it for the evening. So thank you. Thank you to everybody on Zoom. I hope you've heard me okay, and I hope you've enjoyed this evening as much as